Today we're finally getting back to work on the Budget Crawler project. Now I've kind of taken a few months off from working on this. I had a pretty busy summer, was in and out of town, and basically just didn't get a whole lot done on this project. So today we're going to tie up a few loose ends before we move on to anything more substantial. Again, there's just kind of been a few things that have been overhanging from previous projects that need to be finished up, and other small things that aren't worth making a full video about. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, off the top of my head, a few of the things that we have to do, we need a front drive shaft. That's pretty important. We need to have four-wheel drive. The right front axle shaft U-joint is well past its expiration date, and that needs to be replaced. We need to get ourselves a full-size spare tire. We need some rocker protection. It's been running pretty rough, and I'd like to change out the throttle position sensor because I have a really good feeling that that's what the problem is. We need to swap the roll bars in this thing, because although this is a California Jeep and it's super clean as far as northern vehicles go where I'm at, the bases of the roll bar are all rusted because I think that it was kept without windows for a long time and water built up and rusted out the bottom of the roll bar. So we're going to take out the roll bar that's in here. I have another spare roll bar from another Jeep I had a while back and parted out. That is mostly in better shape than the one in here, except for one of the little pads where the roll bar comes down and mounts to the body. That's very rusted on the other roll bar, so I'm going to take the only partially rusted one off of this roll bar, cut it off, weld it onto the other roll bar, and then install the other roll bar in here. I started off by putting a drive shaft back in this thing. It is actually the stock drive shaft that came on here. It's probably a little on the short side, but I think it'll work out just fine. Then I went ahead and replaced the axle shaft U-joint. Actually, I ended up just replacing the shaft. I had a spare shaft on hand, which was a little bit easier than, a little quicker really, than changing the U-joint on the shaft. U-joint probably would have been about, I don't know, 20 bucks maybe, roughly. But it was just a little easier to throw in a shaft with good U-joint, so that's what we did. Then on to the roll bar. Well, that didn't go quite as smoothly as I had hoped. Basically, every bolt holding this thing in place was rusted in place. And if you've ever tried to remove one of these, you know that they're all held in place with Torx head bolts. So after stripping a few bolt heads and breaking a few Torx bits, I just ended up welding a nut onto every single bolt on the roll bar to get it out. Then we went ahead and replaced the foot on the new roll bar. This is the new roll bar you're seeing here. This is the foot that came off of the original roll bar to the Jeep. So we just welded that up. I gave it a quick coat of paint and then installed it in the Jeep. And of course, before we hit the trails, there's one super critical component that we're missing on the back end here, which is a spare tire, and at that, a full-size spare tire. So I've got 33-inch tires on the rest of the Jeep here. And I just picked up this 33-inch spare tire off of Facebook Marketplace. This is the same size. It's a different tire, but as long as we have the same size, who really cares, because it's just going to be a spare tire. And it's got a stamped steel wheel, just like my other ones, except it's got a little different pattern, but again, who cares? If you're not paying attention, I think it will look like the same wheel as the other ones. This one's got the D window right there, and my others have the circular holes like this. This is a Krager Soft 8. And this is some kind of a Pro Comp deal. So let's throw this thing on. So as some of you may remember, we did a little three-part series on putting this rear bumper together here, basically modifying a used bumper. And in the process of that, we pulled the bumper in about 2 inches closer to the body than it was from the manufacturer, whoever manufactured it. I'm not sure what brand this bumper was, but now that we have a spare tire on here, let's take a look and see how the spare tire plays into those modifications. So I've got this straight edge here. I'm just going to line it up with the rear tire and the bumper, pretending that this spare tire wasn't even here to see what our departure angle is, and we'll see if the spare tire kind of eats into that at all. So I'd say right about here is our departure angle. We've got the tire. And I've got the furthest point out on the bumper, which is a hitch, and you can see a little bit of a gap there between the straight edge and the tire, so that's good. So in theory, anything that we can climb down at this angle, the spare tire is not going to interfere with. Obviously, theory is not reality. You know, I've got jagged things that stick up, and Things are even steeper than this that we'll end up dragging over and may end up dragging on the spare tire, but I really don't think we could get in much closer than we are, so that's a good thing. And the other thing I want to look at is how close this tire gets to the body when the tire carrier swings all the way out. So you can see we've got two holes right here that this pin can drop into to lock the tire carrier in place, either straight back from the Jeep or at maybe a 45-degree angle or so coming out this way. So if we bring it out to the 45-degree angle hole, is this tire going to interfere with the body? Let's find out. And that's where it's going to sit. You can see it is super close, but it doesn't actually touch. So perfect. I mean, we could not have fit any bigger tire on here without it hitting the tail light, and not much bigger at all without it hitting the body. So turns out 33-inch tire is the perfect size tire for this modified bumper. And last but certainly not least, I threw on a set of rock rails that I had kicking around. I actually picked these up for my other Jeep, but never got around to refinishing them and installing on there. I paid $100 for these, which is a pretty good deal, but they are frame-mounted rock rails, and I'm not a real big fan on the hardware that mounts them to the frame because I think it could certainly be stronger. As you can see, we've got some rectangular tubing that goes from the main part of the rock rail here back to the frame. There's a little C-gusset kind of thing that goes around, wraps around the frame here, and then just a flat piece of steel on the back. And the way this is held together is, to me, it looks like some all-thread in here, and then a nut that sandwiches the flat piece up against the back side of the frame. And I mean, I don't know what grade this is. Maybe it's decent, like grade 8 or equivalent. Maybe it's not, I don't know, because I bought these things used off Craigslist and I have no clue what brand they are. So I don't want to totally trust these things. Like I said, I bought these for my other Jeep, and I planned on redoing the mounts to the frame. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I do plan to beef them up quite a bit. Now, trying not to go off on too much of a tangent here, there are guys that are die-hard frame-mounted rock rail guys and guys that are die-hard body-mounted rock rail guys. And I'm kind of an in-between kind of guy. So the downside to frame mounted is it will deflect and potentially crunch your rocker if you come down hard enough on it, because it's really hard to build something super strong that comes that far off the frame. So that's the main downside to frame mounted. The downside to body mounted is, well, you got to drill into your body. But by drilling those holes, you basically are saving the rest of your body other than those holes you drilled. So kind of pluses and minuses to both. Eventually I will get some body mounted rock rails on here, but for now, these frame mounted ones will suffice. One more quick side note for anyone who picks up on the fact that there's a hardtop on this Jeep right now. I bought this for my other Jeep, and I used this Jeep to pick it up a few months ago, and it's kind of stayed on here ever since because it keeps the water out a lot better than the soft top does. And this Jeep sits outside year-round where my other Jeep is undercover year-round. And I do eventually plan on putting this on the other Jeep, but who knows. If it ends up staying on here long enough, I'll just include it in the price of this Jeep because I think that's only fair. And I didn't really pay that much for it either. It was $350 I paid, which is kind of the going rate for these, like $300 to $400 in the summer where I live, which I think to some of you is going to be kind of outrageous because you live in parts of the country where cars don't rust. So where I live, cars rust out really bad, really quickly, and basically that means that the Jeeps go away, but the hardtops stay behind because they're fiberglass. And there ends up being an excess of hardtops, bringing the price down. So I may eventually include that in the price of the build. Maybe I won't if I end up putting it on my other Jeep, but either way, that's where it came from. Now let's talk about how much we spent tying up all these loose ends here. So our previous total from the last video was just over $3,800. Today we put in a front drive shaft that cost nothing because that was the original front drive shaft for this Jeep. We replaced an axle shaft. Now the axle shaft is out of an axle that will be going into this Jeep eventually. So I'll include basically the cost of that axle in the episode when I install the axle. So for now, we're just going to say that didn't cost anything. The spare tire was $100, and I spent about $15 in gas going to get it.
The roll bar that I installed was out of a parts Jeep that I had, so I didn't really pay anything for that. There was a little bit of time and welding, materials like cutoff wheels, changing the foot on that roll bar, but I'm not going to bother counting any of that right now. Ended up replacing the throttle position sensor, and I actually lost the footage for that, so that's why you didn't see that. I bought one off of eBay that was $8. That didn't work. I had the seller send me another one. That one didn't work. And eventually I just ended up pulling a sensor off of an old engine I had sitting around that was an OEM sensor, and that worked great. So technically the final sensor that went in there cost me nothing, but I spent $8 on eBay sensors before that. And then we have the rock rails, which were $100. Those were intended for another Jeep, and they may eventually go on that other Jeep, because I would like to eventually upgrade this Jeep to body-mounted rock rails, as they offer a little better protection. And that brings our new total for the build up to $4,085.47. So we're still about $900 under our $5,000 goal. And I think really the only things standing on our way right now in terms of building a capable rock crawler for under $5,000 are going to be a gas tank skid plate and the transfer case skid plate. And other than that, we're in pretty good shape. You know, we've got the locker up front, we've got the winch, we've got rocker protection now. We've got the 33-inch tires, and if only we could find a capable driver somewhere, I think we'd have a pretty good Jeep. Now, of course, we do have a few things working against us, which are going to be the Dana 35 in the rear end. As long as we don't go too hard on it, I think it'll last just fine. If we start beating on it too bad, we're definitely gonna have problems with it. And then on top of that, we've got the 410 gears still with the 4-cylinder engine running 33-inch tires, and it's not ideal, but it's certainly bearable. It would be nice to re-gear to maybe 488s, but we can certainly live with the 410s for now. And if you weren't sure what was in store next for this Jeep, there are a few hints right there. So as usual, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next video.